Welcome to Feminist Question Time. We have Menasche from the USA, Francis Smootz from Germany, Annet Birungi from Uganda, Milagros Castillo from Peru, and Lisha Ada de Bruyne from Ireland. This Feminist Question Time is brought to you by Women's Human Rights Campaign. It's a global organisation defending women's sex-based rights. It promotes the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which has been signed by over 19,250 people from 138 countries. And it's supported by 364 organizations. As well as signatories, we have activists, we have country contacts in 48 countries. And if you'd like to get involved, go to the womensdeclaration.com website and you'll find a button to press to fill in a volunteer form or get in touch with us. The first panelist we're going to speak to is Menasche from the USA. Can you tell us about the new Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights and the struggle within the Green Party? Anne is from the United States, so it's the Green Party of the USA to defend the Georgia Green Party and holders of gender-critical ideas. So over to you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to start by talking about what happened in the Georgia Party, and then I'll go into our organizing efforts now to create a Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights. So I'm going to start actually with a little quote from George Orwell, who said, "In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." And I think it's definitely a time of universal deceit right now, and truth-telling is extremely important. On July 26th, just like a week ago of this year, the National Committee of the Green Party of the United States voted by a vote of 119 yes, 17 no, and 6 abstentions to revoke the accreditation of the Georgia State Green Party. What was Georgia's crimes? Put that in quotes. Passing resolutions in Georgia and the state party endorsing the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights and the feminist amendments to the Equality Act sponsored by FIST. Both acts of passing these resolutions were defined as acts of transphobia and hate. First, for a few words about the US Green Party. Not everyone knows about what Green parties are or what the US Green Party is. We are a very small, left-wing, decentralized party struggling under the difficult conditions in the US, where we have a very money-driven, undemocratic, winner-take-all electoral system that has made it very difficult to break through for third parties. The party in recent years has considered itself eco-socialist, though there are a range of views on socialism within the party. And we are all environmentalists, of course, and the originators of the idea of the Green New Deal, which is a far more vigorous version than that advocated by liberal Democrats. We're anti-war. We're advocates for universal health care, which the US lacks completely. Economic justice. We're promoters of grassroots democracy. And we're united by the 4 pillars, which are peace, ecology, social justice, and democracy. And you'll notice that the 10 key values includes feminism and gender equity being undefined. Feminism sounds good too. The Green Party has a detailed platform that includes 4.5 pages, I counted them, on feminism. Excellent, actually, though it does need some updating, but this is a very good statement. We officially support the Nordic model regarding prostitution, though that position has been under threat recently. There's a few sentences on gender identity of recent vintage, including the right to quote unquote self-determine one's gender and sex. And in the last few years, under the mantra of trans women are women, and in a time when the party itself has shrunk, has gotten older, and is desperate to attract youth, trans rights activists have staged a silent coup over the party. They've took over the National Lavender Caucus, which is their base of operation, the Women's Caucus, with men, of course, joining the caucus, and other functioning committees of the National Party. But it wasn't always like that. I remember in the late 1990s, in the early days of the California Green Party, I attended a women's caucus at a Green Party conference that was women only, where we discussed transgenderism, and we all agreed that it was a sexist, homophobic, and otherwise reactionary phenomenon. So I have that clear memory. Things have changed. The battle over Georgia that just ended was a year-long struggle within the party. The Lavender Caucus filed a formal complaint against Georgia seeking disaccreditation for their crimes of transphobia in December of 2020. But this was preceded months earlier by threats and a call for what the Lavender Caucus called Justice and Reconciliation, which was a demand to the Georgia party on threat of disaccreditation to engage in an Orwellian process of re-education, to be culminated, of course, in recanting of its feminist views. The Georgia leadership refused to engage in such a process, instead proposing a real discussion and debate on the underlying issues. And that, of course, was not something that the Lavender Caucus could tolerate. In May of 2020, Green Party members and supporters who were opposed to expulsion and supported democratic discussion on the underlying issues formed themselves into the Dialogue Not Expulsion Caucus. We circulated a statement and garnered support of 288 members and supporters of the Green Party from around the country. This was successful in slowing down the drive for expulsion, but unfortunately only temporarily. Once the complaint was filed in the Accreditations Committee, every undemocratic trick in the book was used against Georgia in violation of the principles of the party of grassroots democracy. The Georgia party was denied the ability to properly defend itself, to cross-examine witnesses, and to present evidence in its own defense. And the committee itself had already been stacked with LC supporters. Most national committee members, it seems, failed to read or review what we produced. And boy, did we produce stuff. They refused to basically engage with us on the merits. The secretary of the Georgia party was even excluded from the Zoom room when the Lavender Caucus provided its testimony against Georgia. He was shut out of the room. There were constant smears and name calling and guilt by association. People called bigots, fascists, transphobes, transmissic. That's a new word they came up with. It's not in the regular dictionary, it's in the urban, some other dictionary. Supporters of the Proud Boys, any party leader or member of the National Committee were targeted, including lifelong socialists, union leaders, and longtime Greens. And they would be attacked if they raised the least bit of questions or even a mild disagreement with the Lavender Caucus or trans ideology. This, of course, created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, because who wants to be labeled a fascist? State delegates to the National Committee were silenced by moderators for expressing dissenting views, so they couldn't post anymore to the National Committee list. And they were even excluded and expelled from their National Committee positions through maneuvers that were going on the state level. One woman member of the National Committee who supported Georgia received a threat from a man who had previously threatened her with physical violence, and she was the one who was penalized. But there was also great courage and fortitude shown by defenders of Georgia. Who met weekly in Zoom, on Zoom, what we called our war room, collectively planning our strategy. These included dozens of women and men who came out of the woodwork to contact us from all over the country. One example of such courage was the sole dissenter on the Accreditations Committee, won over during the course of the struggle, and he wrote a scathing minority report, which the Accreditations Committee attempted to suppress, though we were nonetheless able to get it into the hands of the National Committee. Subsequently and quickly, the state party removed him from his National Committee position, I believe before the vote, while he was on vacation, even though he had months left on his term. We gathered an impressive group of present and former Green Party activists from states all over the country, a large majority of whom are gender critical feminist women or pro-feminist men. We produced thoughtful and voluminous defense materials, both written articles and oral testimony defending gender critical positions, most that were posted to the Dialogue Not Expulsion website. And we also collected oral testimony, including Hilla Kerner from Vancouver Rape Relief, Amparo Domingo from the Women's Human Rights Campaign, and 2 trans-identified females who oppose child transition and who openly admitted that anti-lesbian prejudice is what drove them to transition, quote unquote, in the first place. This is a website, Dialogue Not Expulsion, and www.dialoguenotexpulsion.org, I think it is, so it's blocking it. And you can see tons and tons of written materials, and hopefully it'll be turned into a book, as well as the videos that I discussed. So let me just quickly go over 2 things. One is, why did this happen? Where do we go from here? Quickly, why this happened is, first, I think we need to be aware that gender identity ideology does not arise from the left itself, but from the neoliberal corporate establishment. And basically the left that we have, which is tiny and weak, is not independent enough from the corporate rulers. Second, we live in a time of deep backlash against the gains of second and even first wave feminism, and that has an impact on the left. Third, any left-wing movement must educate the new generations coming in on our experiences from earlier generations, and particularly on feminism. That's been lost. And finally, there's no left effectively, there can be no left that effectively fights war for housing and healthcare to save the environment without the leadership of self-conscious radical feminist women. So where do we go from here? We are forming a new organization called the Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights. This is our founding statement, and we are women and men who are Green Party oriented. Our politics are basically green in the best sense of the word. We reject the actions of the National Green Party. We are building a movement, a tendency that is explicitly pro-radical feminist, pro-sex-based rights. We endorse the Women's Sex-Based Rights Declaration, and we'll actually do that officially real soon. Recognize women are oppressed as a sex, no one's born in the wrong body, support the rights of women to have reproductive rights, abortion and birth control, and the rights of lesbians and gay men. And so all the good feminist positions we take, and we want to create a movement and a tendency that we don't know where it's going to go, but we want to create a left worthy of the name that is pro-feminist, that's under the leadership of feminists. Will it lead to a new party? Will it lead to a reformed Green Party? We don't know, but we do know that we need to, that none of the parties, the Democrats, the Republicans, or the current leadership of the Green Party can represent us. Thank you.
We're going to hear from Frances Smootz from Germany. She's a lesbian, a radical feminist, and a student of sports science. And Frances is going to give us a talk about the recent feminist protest in Cologne in Germany for sex-based rights and the following protest at the Dyke March. So welcome, Frances, and over to you.
So it's been about a month ago now, on the 3rd of July. 10 women of the WHRC met at the Dome Cathedral to demonstrate for female sex-based rights and against self-ID. And we walked through the old city of Cologne with signs saying like, women, fact not fiction, lesbians don't have penises, protect women's spaces, no to self-ID, etc. And singing, if a person has a penis, he's a man in German. And we picked audience that couldn't run away. They were sitting in cafes and restaurants outside. So yeah, and We stopped at Heuma, that's a big place in the center of Cologne, built up a camp. So we stayed there for about 2 hours, talked to people, handed out info leaflets, and it was very positive. So we had lots of curious people and no one was really upset about it. And during this time I mentioned there'd be the Dyke March later on in the evening, Dyke with a star. And everyone was like, oh yeah, cool, we have to go there as well and protest a little more. And so, yeah, later on we headed over there, got all our signs out and jumped right in. And I picked the cardboard penis saying lesbians don't have penises. And it took under 2 minutes for the first guard to spot us. And yeah, her head popped as she spotted me with that sign. And she tried to snatch it away from me. Yeah, so I packed that sign away, and the other signs could stay. And we walked on, but no one was really getting our message. So we were thinking about getting at the side of the street and line up so they could actually see us. And then it escalated real fast, and everyone like ran towards us, used their umbrellas to cover the signs and booing. Some of them were shouting piss off and TERFs must go home. Yeah, some middle fingers went up and others tried to snatch our signs away, and I've got a video for that as well. One of us even got in a little fight. So one of them snatched a sign away from one of our women and tore it to pieces, and then sneaked up from behind and wanted to snatch another sign or even the bag with the signs in them. And another woman of ours saw that and grabbed her and pulled her back so she couldn't steal our stuff. And a police officer had to come over and pull them apart. And he was like, what's the fuss about? And she said, yeah, we're being attacked for stating that lesbians don't have penises. And she asked him, officer, do you believe lesbians have penises? And he was like, what the heck? Okay, forget it. You can join the parade if you like, because he was about to pull us out and say, no more for you. And yeah, but we were done there. So yeah, we didn't join anymore. And there's another video of that occasion. After that, like 2 days later on the Dyke March Cologne Facebook page, we found a comment on our actions saying things like, Dyke March Cologne was visited by a group of self-proclaimed feminists who deny trans people's existence. There is nothing feminist about transphobia or contempt for mankind. solidarity means to point out violence and exclusion carried out deliberately in our lesbi queer spaces. And there is no room for your violence in the Dijkmarch Cologne. So reading all that crap, we posted a bit of sense into the comment section. And after about 2 days, the whole thing got shut down and all our posts were deleted. And just one really good post was left asking how exactly did their violence, so our violence, look like? And that question never got answered.
Do you have quite a strong lesbian feminist group in Cologne or in that area of Germany?
Not at all. I'm not in the scene or anything. So yeah. And I guess I'll stay out now in the future.
Stop! Nicht provozieren. Dann bitte gehen Sie einfach Ihrer Wege. Gehen Sie einfach Ihrer Wege. Bitte gehen Sie einfach. Ja, sicher.
So we're now going to go to Annet Birungi from Canada. She's the team lead of Imarisha, Dada, Transformer Sister, Female Matters. And Annet, thank you so much for coming on Feminist Question Time. Can you give us an overview of the situation regarding gender identity in Uganda, which is your country, and how much awareness is there of this for the public?
The gender ideology in Uganda, it has been mostly grounded on culture, religion, and the social norms. So the culture and religion and the society is the one that determines you, a woman, or a girl, or a boy, and a man, how you must behave, how you must be in the society, and what you must do. So you find that a girl and a woman grows up to the expectations of the society, the religion, and how the culture describes a woman and how, or a girl, how to is expected to live in the society. So a girl, there is no something like I must know, or I have a right, or how I want to be, how I want to live my life, and how I really want to lead my life. For example, in 2014, there were some arrests made in Uganda of the women and the men who were homosexuals and lesbians, because in Uganda, that is the gender ideology, and it is not allowed to be that. So you find that a woman and the women and girls, they grow how the society expects them to be, and you find that there is nothing like a girl out and say, no, I have to be like this, I have to. Some of them, they will be disowned in the family. One of my colleagues, she's a lesbian, and when her family found out that she was a lesbian, she was disowned. The parents told her that no, we cannot have a person like you in our family, so you are not our person. We cannot have such a child. So you find that what we know in Uganda is that we have to you have to be a girl, you have to be a boy. There is nothing that society want to know, that there is people who have different gender feelings. Maybe I want to be like LGBTQ community has been a threat, has been threatened. Even the activists and the civil society organizations who have come in fight for the rights of the LGBTQ community, you find that their accounts or their organizations become blocked. They cannot they cannot go ahead and defend them. So it is always hard that the government cannot come in, and you find that it has always blamed the civil society, that you get funders to come and disorganize our country and the cultures. Yes, if we talk about the awareness amongst the public, what has been done is that most civil society organizations like Imarisha are taking in like 80% of the government role in raising awareness about gender ideology, how girls and women should be, and how focusing on their rights, because sex right is a women's right, and the reproductive right is also a women's right. So much has been done, even though activists and the women's rights organization are always criticized.
So it sounds quite a difficult situation for your transformer sister and Female Matters, because struggling for women's rights, and within that, and then lots of homophobia. Within that, you found the declaration, our Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, and you've signed up to that. Why did you sign the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights?
Actually, why I signed it, if you look at the success of the most women's rights in the whole world, and in Uganda particular, it has been founded by the female movements. It has been founded by the feminists, by the collectives. So why I signed it, I believe in collectives. Individual, you cannot fight yourself alone. And when we are many, when we are in collectives, our voices are heard, and we feel our voices are uplifted. And also I wanted to how to contribute to globally from Uganda, from Imarisha Dada, what we do at the grassroots level, what we do at Imarisha Dada, what we do in the rural area. So I signed because I really believe collectiveness, the movements. If you look at the histories, the struggles of women movements, they have been through the collectives. So Women Human Rights Campaign, it actually, to me, it came in the right time, because I was had established a movement which is called Female Matters Movement, to uplift the voice of young women and girls, to come up and speak up about their voices, to come up and speak up about their rights, how they want to live. So that is one of the reasons why I signed the declaration, to also put my signature, that I'm also against agenda ideologies. I'm also against what the society expects of women and girls.
Can you tell us more about your organization, Imarisha Dada, Transformer Sister? How long have you been going, and what work do you do?
Imarisha Dada is a Swahili word meaning transformer sister. So it started as a movement, started as the Female Matters movement. Yes, the movement still goes on. So when we came to register it in Uganda, it was during the time of elections. So we got a lot of criticism from government, from other partners, that we could not register a movement at that time. So then we decided to register it as the Imarisha Dada, as a civil society organization. But still, Imarisha Dada runs Female Matters movement. It's an independent, safe space to come and promote their rights, so they can inspire collective actions that challenge all forms of oppression from social, cultural, political, and the environment. So we formed the movement so that to create a space and give their views, challenge challenge all forms of the injustice and oppressions, so that they can have an environment where they can prosper in society. So basically, one of our vision is we want to breed the young feminisms. We want to breed young feminisms with the feminist voice. We want to see that voice of young woman coming up, come and fight for their rights, talk on their own, have their own mind, and have the freedom. So we do this by engaging in conversational circles. Conversation circles, we always have small spaces of young women so that we can know what they think, what they feel about, and what is challenging them, so that we have also collectives like signatories to come together and present our views at the local councils, in the government and other public sectors. So that's what Imarisha Dada does. And also we do campaigns. We form movement. We have formed movements like Female Matters movement. It is strictly a feminist movement, and it is only for young women, because we feel that over the time, these young women have not got a space. They have not got a free space to come in and have their voices. Of course, in Uganda, the government have come in to promote, to emancipate for women's rights, but still the space is not safe. We don't feel safe when we are talking about women. We don't feel safe when we are talking about sex rights. We don't feel safe when we are talking about what concerns us as women. So so this one we want to help young women to identify themselves, especially the young girls, identify themselves, to discover themselves and know what they really want and how they can be helped, so that they can have that voice that everyone will hear, and they can confidently talk what matters to them.
When you became a feminist, how did you know that you were a feminist, and where did you get your information? Was other books that women read and share in Uganda? Do you have some important Ugandan feminists that you follow, or did you make it? Where did you find out your feminist ideas?
Yes. We have women who have fought our struggles. We have our ancestral women who have fought our struggles. So me, as a childhood, when I was growing up, I did certain things from the beginning I didn't like as a girl. Like, we were raised like, you have to do this, you have to do this. There's nothing like my elders talked about, like, you know what, Annet, you have to grow, focus on yourself, do what is important for you. But you find that the conversations the elders could give us was like, Annet, you have to grow, get married, and be like this, behave like this. So all that thing from the child that was challenging all those gender ideologies towards women and girls. So I learned feminism about like 6 years ago. I had attended the feminism training. One of the national organizations in Uganda had organized the feminism training. So I attended the feminism training, and it helped me to really know who I am better, to discover myself. So I realized that there are some more women who were feminists, but they did not know that they are feminists, because even now in Uganda, when you talk about feminism in most societies and communities, they think that feminism, you are fighting the men, you are fighting masculinity, which is not the case. So I'm really very proud that I discovered myself. And of course, we have women in Uganda. There are very many and feminist organizations that I'm looking at that have been fighting for women's rights. They have been feministing for everyone to enjoy their rights without judgment, without negative attitude, but of course to support. Thank you.
We'll move on now to Milagros Castillo. She's from Peru. She's from Frente Feminista Radical. Milagros is going to talk to us about the progress of Frente Feminist Peru, about the troubles they've had because of the political position within feminism and that Milagros has had, and also about the challenges in living in one of the most conservative countries in Latin America. There's a very liberal, pro-queer, institutionalized feminism in Peru.
En Perú, las organizaciones de mujeres existen desde hace muchos años. Muchas de estas han sido la columna vertebral de comunidades enteras. Velaban por los demás e intentaban suplementar las carencias de un Estado ausente. Hace poco más de medio siglo que se fundó el feminismo institucional en Perú, pero con el devenir de los años, lamentablemente, han adoptado la postura de dejar los problemas de la mujer en pos de la agenda de género. No existe un feminismo organizado y articulado en Perú como en otros países de Latinoamérica. Lo que existe son diversos grupos, organizaciones e iniciativas que han ido realizando de manera paralela un trabajo en ciertas áreas. Para poner en contexto, el Perú es uno de los países más conservadores de América Latina, con un gran problema de inequidad y violencia hacia las mujeres. Fuimos uno de los últimos países en Latinoamérica en permitir el voto femenino y nuestra legislación sobre el aborto y autonomía de nuestros cuerpos es una de las más duras contra las mujeres. A pesar de que en las últimas décadas nos han querido vender como un país en desarrollo con una economía floreciente, en realidad somos uno de los países con mayor desigualdad y violencia contra las mujeres y las niñas. Ante esta situación, hace algunos años hicieron más fuertes las voces de los diferentes grupos feministas, siguiendo la tendencia de otros países en Latinoamérica y el mundo occidental. Con todo esto, nosotros pensaríamos que por fin el movimiento se consagraría, sin embargo no ha sido así. Y una de las razones es por la avanzada e invasión del dogma queer en el feminismo institucional y del Estado, el cual ha dejado de lado la realidad de la mujer peruana para centrar su agenda en postulados traídos del extranjero. Actualmente, el feminismo liberal está instalado en todas las organizaciones, impulsando una ley de identidad de género en búsqueda del borrado de la categoría de sexo. Copia de la legislación argentina, sin ningún tipo de análisis frente a la realidad de la mujer peruana. Esto genera en el público general un rechazo más por el conservadurismo propio del país. Más por el conservadurismo propio del país que por las implicancias jurídicas en la protección de los derechos de las mujeres. Por eso es importante que tengamos muy en claro que la protección de los derechos de las mujeres en base al sexo sea algo que se cumpla y que se vele. Aquí en Perú hemos avanzado a pasos muy lentos. Ya existen leyes como licencia por maternidad, protecciones laborales en casos de acoso sexual y hostigamiento, contra el feminicidio, etc. Todas tienen la raíz de proteger a la mujer en base al sexo. Lamentablemente se está utilizando el género como si fuera intercambiable. No podemos perder eso, por eso es importante hacer llegar la declaración a otras mujeres. Nosotras como Frente Feminista Radical del Perú venimos trabajando desde hace más de 3 años en la difusión de contenido radical, abolicionista, tomando en cuenta la realidad de nuestro país. Nuestra existencia como colectiva ha sido accidentada debido a los problemas y retos que hemos tenido en este tiempo. No solo porque feminismo sigue siendo una mala palabra en gran parte de la sociedad peruana, sino también porque hemos recibido censura, ataques y cierre de espacios por parte de otras compañeras y grupos organizados por el solo hecho de seguir la línea del feminismo radical. Al principio éramos diversas iniciativas que nos reunimos bajo un mismo frente. Lamentablemente, A pesar de los esfuerzos, se dieron una serie de incidentes que hicieron desistir a algunas compañeras en el camino. Recuerdo que una de las primeras reuniones que íbamos a realizar fue expuesta de manera negativa en un grupo de transactivistas y personas trans. Amenazaron con irrumpir en la reunión y querían explicáramos cuál era nuestro criterio para decidir quiénes eran mujeres y quiénes no. Hicieron un contraevento y tuvimos que ocultar la dirección de la reunión. Esto fue uno de una serie de incidentes que lograron hacer desistir a varias compañeras de seguirnos o incluso opinar de manera pública su inclinación hacia el feminismo radical o posiciones abolicionistas. Nosotras seguimos con nuestro trabajo de difusión y activismo a pesar de las dificultades. Con el pasar de los años hemos visto un incremento en la censura a las mujeres que exponen sus cuestionamientos hacia el género. Ni siquiera es necesario autodenominarte radfem o feminista abolicionista para ser separada de espacios o recibir advertencias de que ese tipo de pensamiento no es bienvenido en asambleas feministas. Esto también se ha unido a que muchas de estas feministas antiguas, podríamos llamarlas institucionales, favorecen posiciones regulacionistas frente a la explotación sexual de las mujeres y los vientres de alquiler. Actualmente, en los espacios feministas más mediáticos se incluyen advertencias de que son libres de transfobia, capacitismo y de coloniales. Los grupos más grandes tienen estas etiquetas, lo cual, dicho de manera real, significa que son transactivistas, regulacionistas y que no aceptan cualquier cuestionamiento a esos dogmas. El solo cuestionar la existencia de la identidad de género ya es considerado transfobia y motivo de separación o censura. Hablar de abolición de la prostitución y pornografía es motivo para ser señalada de puritana, moralista y colonizadora. Se impulsa la agenda de la ley de identidad de género antes que la despenalización del aborto en todas sus causales. Nosotras como Frente Feminista Radical tenemos una gran tarea y trabajo por delante. Estamos actualmente tejiendo vínculos y buscando otras agrupaciones radicales en todo el Perú. La tarea es ardua, pero vamos paso a paso. Sabemos que muchas de las mujeres peruanas que siguen el feminismo mediático liberal también se encuentran esa disonancia y que el discurso generista no les termina de cerrar. No levantan la voz porque ven lo que pasa con otras compañeras y no quieren parecer poco empáticas, arcaicas, y es parte de la socialización femenina que nos empuja a ser la madre de todas las luchas. A esas mujeres queremos y vamos a llegar, porque la situación de inequidad y opresión que se da en nuestro país contra nosotras es por haber nacido mujeres.
We're now going to move to Lisha Ada de Bruin. Lisha is from Ireland. She's the founder and spokesperson of the Countess Didn't Fight for This. You commissioned an independent survey into attitudes about gender in Ireland. What's been happening with the Countess Didn't Fight for This, etc.?
We are sort of going through a period, well, I am, of kind of assessing what we've achieved so far in the last 10 months. We're only 10 months launched. So I thought I could talk you through what we've been doing and what we intend to do and our various campaigns and work behind the scenes. So firstly, who are we? I'll come to that in a moment. So this is who we are. We're a group of progressive women from all walks of life, students, stay-at-home mothers, doctors and lawyers. We're fully self-funded, we're volunteer-led, we're not affiliated to any party or religion, and we've members all over Ireland. We are part of a growing group of grassroots groups globally who are resisting trans activism and calling out the impact on women and children. We represent a growing constituency of people in Ireland who are really waking up to the impact of what could loosely be called inclusivity, and the impact of those measures and policies on women and children. As the time has passed over the last 10 months, I would say that I have become more nuanced in my messaging. So now we're not here to change anyone's beliefs around transgender identity. We're simply here calling for a wider lens in terms of examining the impact of these laws and policy in Ireland. I would say that's particular to, exactly where we are in Ireland. We have, it's fair to say that we are really the poster child of self-ID, one of the first countries to bring it in. We're English speaking, we're seen as a nice little friendly country, and definitely we're touted around the world as a country where it's bedded down without any problems. However, over the course of the 10 months, we've kind of had a three-prong approach. One is to a public service, really, to actually just educate people about what the law actually does and the impact on women and children, and to raise consciousness and awareness, and to try to shift the narrative, because thus far the narrative, before we launched, the narrative was very much about there's nothing to see here, trans rights are women's rights, trans rights are human rights, and this is part of the great kind of progressive consensus that we now live with in Ireland. So over the last 10 months, we've had three major sort of campaigns. The first one was called We Will Be Heard. And this was our response to a letter that was signed by 27 different NGOs, including Amnesty, but also the National Women's Council of Ireland, calling for new groups. So that was particular to us, to be disenfranchised. So we ran a campaign online, and it kind of caught a wave, really, and it trended globally in the UK and the US, as well as obviously at home in Ireland. And I think that was our first sort of consciousness raising in terms of women being, women like us being repressed. And then after that, we ran our first ever real life campaign nationally. Now it looked like, we suddenly kind of broke the media monolith and started getting some media traction. But I have to say, behind the scenes, this was after 6 months of hard slog of sending out press release after press release after press release. And I think what happened with that, so that was basically a story whereby it just, I think, it was the day that gender identity ideology came home in Ireland and came to kind of the doorstep of families in Ireland, across Ireland, because, and to this day, I'm still shocked at what happened, really. So we were there campaigning and raising awareness and lobbying around the fact that if the advice from the trans lobby groups was adhered to in schools, adolescent boys who identified as girls would be allowed to use the girls' toilets. And so therefore the girls would lose their single sex spaces. And that was our concern. Little did we ever think that the Department of Education in Ireland would actually completely pull the rug from under those girls by attempting to remove all single sex toilets across all secondary schools in Ireland. And to this day, I find that as a real extreme example of how captured the public sector is in Ireland, that we are at this point whereby it is seen as a rational response to so-called bullying, and that it's a normal thing to do to actually remove single-sex toilets from secondary schools. So we launched a campaign around that and made the mainstream media the front page of the paper of record. And then we scrambled and put together a toolkit, which was used to sort of put the Department of Education on notice, but also, and this is the important thing, parents have a lot of rights in Ireland. They're enshrined in our constitution, and they're part of the 1998 Education Act, and parents really can kick up a fuss about their local school their children go to. So we've seen that as a very important angle for us in terms of campaigning. And there was a backtrack, but I don't think it's, I think they are still trying to push this through. And then the most recent thing we did was as an historic poll, the first ever poll of its kind in Ireland. We worked with a household name called Red Sea. And I would say to any activists out there who are considering doing a poll, you know, we were aware that there is a lot of capture in Ireland, but the thing about capture is people aren't aware that they are captured. So I would say, you know, it's fair to say it was a very long, complicated, torturous process. And you'll see when I come to the poll, I'll just share my screen now, that, you know, we have a very strict social media policy in terms of language. For instance, we don't use the word trans woman, but when it came to this poll, compromises had to be made. I felt personally it was more important to get it over the line. And in fact, the process was so tricky that by 2 o'clock Monday, it almost collapsed. The whole thing almost collapsed due to disagreements about language and about how to kind of analyze it. But we got there, and this data is here now. And lo and behold, like every other poll that's been done in the US and the UK, it turns out that the majority of people agree with us, that our position is not in fact, you know, radical or fringe, that actually the majority of people who hold an opinion about these issues agree with us. So these are the top lines. You can see figures are very strong here. Now, we felt it was very important to ask questions beyond just the conflict of rights between women's protections under the law and trans demands, trans activism. And we went deeper than that. So this one, for instance, it's nothing specifically to do with self-ID, it's broader, because in Ireland we do have a policy of mixed sex wards. So here we see 64% actually think that hospitals should be required to have single-sex wards. 77% say that you should be allowed to demand someone of the same natal sex as you for an intimate examination. And this one is interesting. So I, when I wrote the poll script, I really wanted to offer a choice of a third space, because that's what we would advocate for, but obviously we don't spend our time campaigning for that. There are plenty of well-funded trans lobby groups who can do that should they wish to. But the polling company didn't want us to offer a third space as a, you know, alongside single sex. And I really resisted that because I felt that was forcing people to make a binary choice, and people don't necessarily want to, but they said it was exclusionary to talk about a third space. So I said, okay, fine. Now, as you can see, even within that context, it still came out quite strong in favor of single sex spaces. So in fact, the question was, should public buildings, for example, banks and schools, should they have to provide single sex toilets or mixed sex? And 62% say single sex. So it's fair to say the Irish public are very, very much in favor of all our positions, which we knew anecdotally, but it's very, I think it's very powerful to see it in print, and I think it will have huge leverage for us politically in terms of our lobbying work. Now, this is very interesting. This is the question about self-ID. As you can see, we don't mention the Gender Recognition Act. We don't really even talk about self-ID, because my objective with this was to get past jargon and dig deeper than what people think one means when one says things like a transgender woman, or, you know, because quite often I think people are confusing social expression and presentation with actual rights, laws, and access to spaces. So as you can see here, the question was, at what point, it's tiny, sorry, I'll read it out. At what point, if at all, should a person who identifies as a member of the opposite sex be allowed to change their sex on the birth cert? And this really goes to the heart of the whole issue. I met Robert Wimboot recently, who is one of the signatories of the Jogga principles, and he is the one who's recanted publicly. And he said, you know, once we started to falsify public documents, public records of birth to assuage mental illness, that's where we went wrong. That was when the genie was let out of the bottle, and I tend to agree. And as you can see, so does a huge cohort of the Irish population. So 28% say that people should never be allowed to change their sex in the birth cert. And 26% say only once they've had genital surgery. So that is a really, really strong figure. And only 17%, so less than 1 in 5 people in Ireland think that the law as it stands, that they agree with the law as it stands, which is what we have, which is you fill out a form once to say that you identify as the opposite sex. So we were very, very happy with the findings. We did a very, very broad poll. We kind of asked all the key questions. It's sort of like taking the temperature, of the nation. Changing rooms. Of those who had expressed an opinion, almost twice as many said trans identified males should not have access to female spaces. We were really happy with that. We feel this will be a good ballast against what is happening down the line in Ireland, which I'll come to in a moment, but our government is attempting to amend our equality legislation to include gender identity as a ground. So this is really good data, I think, in terms of what the public feel about that. Sport, as we all know, is the one that people seem to care really deeply about. Really, really, really strong figures there. Again, more than twice as many think that you should not be allowed to play sport of the opposite sex, so men should not be able to play female sport. Now, these two are a little bit more nuanced, and I do think that's because, sadly, the women in refuges and in prisons are so othered that people don't relate their plight to their own lives, whereas with sport and with changing rooms, they do. But we were really, really happy with the result. It felt like a great day. It felt like we were adding a kind of key data set really to the debate globally as well. And it's nice to be able to say, actually, we're not the poster child of self-ID. Actually, Irish people do not agree with any of this. So that was the poll. Now, unfortunately, only one journalist was brave enough to cover that for us. We sent it to every newsroom in Ireland, and only one journalist covered it. And, I have to say, we know, I'm a journalist, and a few of us are journalists, and we know it has news value. We understand its news value. And so it was quite chilling. It was quite chilling to feel that journalists were reading this press release and going, no, it's untouchable. We can't cover it. One journalist did for the Sunday Times, and we're very, very grateful to Brenda Power, but and there has been some other coverage. But so that was the poll. We do think, the thing is, the way I look at it is the data is there now, and it will help us lobby behind the scenes with politicians, because they can't say that they don't know what the people feel about any of gender identity ideology. In terms of what else we've been doing, so that's all the sort of shop front, the campaign, the content, the work that you can see. But we've also been doing lots of submissions. We were signatories to the Wolf submission to the UN. We did a submission to the EU. We're currently doing one to the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. There's a big one coming up for us, which I just alluded to there. So in Ireland, we have self-ID, which there's no gatekeeping. There's no state oversight of who gets to fill out the form and get the gender recognition certificate. However, I see us very much at a cliff edge because we are about to now. So there is a move to include gender identity as a grounds. And how I see this working is that once gender identity, once our equality legislation is amended to include gender identity, I see this as the criminalization of the defense of female spaces against male incursion. So were I in a changing room with my daughters and a man walks in, I can't stop him. If I stop him, that is discriminatory on my part. And indeed, if I complain to the owner of the swimming pool, they're also discriminating. And that's what we're seeing playing out around the world, like in Wee Spa and various places. Now, this is going to be an open submission. So we formed a working group, and we will start putting together our own submission, but also a template, because I see our role as, I don't want to just help people who are already articulate and empowered and aware of structure and politicized. Obviously they are part of our family, but I want to help. I think we should be empowering people who don't feel like they have the vocabulary, don't feel like they don't feel confident enough to write that letter to their public representative or their local school or to their paper. So that's what we're trying to do at this phase of kind of our evolution. Also, we will be, I'm speaking at the Philia conference in October, which I'm delighted and honoured to be speaking about. I'll be speaking about the specific kind of cultural and historical landscape in Ireland with regard to our work. And the other thing, I've talked about all our behind the scenes work, our submissions. I wanted to pick up on what one of the speakers said, which really struck me. The woman speaking from Uganda, she said, feminism in Uganda is seen as hating men or being against men or masculinity. And it struck me that, recently I've had conversations with women who I really respect and admire and who are highly educated women who have said to me, one of them said, I just think it's all about, saying that all men are bad and hating men. And what I've noticed is that there's a real, in Irish culture, people are very uncomfortable to talk about structure, to talk about male pattern violence, to talk about the fact that one sex class rapes and murders the other. There's a real tendency to not want to look at the darkness. And I think that is probably global, but and I think that's why liberal feminism is so compelling, because you don't have to then look at those things. However, I think our challenge in terms of our campaigning is you have to understand structure. That is the theoretical framework of our argument, of the resistance, because trans women or women is only damaging to women if you understand structural inequality. So I think that's our challenge, to try to explain why to explain our position to people who don't necessarily want to look at structure. So what I've tried to do and tended to do, sometimes by default, we've tried to really narrow our scope and talk about loopholes, unintended consequences, well-meaning but badly thought through legislation. Furthermore, we write to regulatory bodies and statutory bodies, and we remind them of their responsibilities, and we ask them, do they have a policy? Have they done a risk assessment? And I think, it's a slog, but bit by bit, that will have an impact. So it's kind of about finding different angles. Like we have a working group called Follow the Money, which is led by an accountant. And, we've made great inroads there recently, just simply by actually writing to all the different regulatory bodies that look at corporate governance, that look at the spending of public funds. The biggest trans lobby group in Ireland have been late with their filing of their accounts on a number of occasions. And we were just watching and then just pushing on that pressure point. It's not a big, glamorous, sexy campaign, but it is very, very useful, because it's just another pressure point. And I think also it brings people in. So, it brings the people in who don't really want to get involved in the debate, who don't care really about women's rights and child safeguarding. And sadly, that is a big swathe of the population, but they might care about where taxpayers' money is going. So there's all these different angles that we try to look at and bring people in. And that's also why I think, I don't say that we're a feminist organization for that reason, because I want people who don't perceive themselves as feminists to agree with our positions. So, for example, I've had people say, oh, I'm not a feminist. It's just not fair, though. It's just not fair. And I think that's good, because those people are then, you're bringing in a wider base, and you're looking at this, we're looking at this from a kind of very broad spectrum. But obviously, unconsciously, then you are raising awareness and consciousness, but it's kind of under the surface. So we've just recently joined an international working group on prisons, which I feel is really important. I think that's how we are going to overcome this ideology, is by joining up globally. In terms of what's happening on the ground, we only learned actually a few days ago, it was confirmed to us that the 3 trans-identified males in female prison in Ireland are actually in isolation 23 hours a day. We had rumors about this, but we knew they were segregated, but not specifically isolated according to the Mandela rules. So I think that is going to be a ticking time bomb, frankly, because that is obviously, it's a breach of those rules after 15 or 16 days. So with that in mind, the prison services now, they've set upon a consultation with stakeholders. So our objective will to be at that table. What we will need to show them is that whilst we appreciate the attempts to keep women safe within the women's state by keeping those men in their prison cells, obviously it's not feasible long term. And that's why there is going to be a consultation. Like we know, for example, when they leave their prison cell, they always have a male and female guard with them. That's the protocol that's in place. So we see no reason why that protocol couldn't be in place in a male prison. It is actually used for gang leaders, and if there's feuds, or if people are, if there's likely to be violence, that is actually typically employed. So there's no reason why that same protocol can't be used to keep trans-identified males safe within the male estate.